Okay, let's jump straight in. So when you first boot up Blender, you're going to be faced with this screen here. You're going to be faced with the cube, and then you got the camera there. You won't be faced with this key map, screencast key map. I downloaded that just to help you guys for navigation, etc. Okay, so you can zoom in and zoom out with the middle mouse button by just basically sliding your middle mouse button. You can rotate by pressing the middle mouse button down, and then you can just scroll from left to right. You can click on an object by simply clicking on it with the left mouse button, and you see that it's highlighted. And this is your camera here, and this is one of your lights. Okay, so that's that sorted. You can also, these icons here, you can say for example you want to move the scene around. This is your hand grab key. You just click on that, and then you can just move up and down, side to side. And then this, instead of using your middle mouse key to zoom in and out, you can basically click on this, and then you can zoom in and out. Yeah, this icon here is your perspective and orthographic view, and this is perspective view. Click on that. That's orthographic. You know that, I don't know if when you was a young kid at school and used to draw those 3D boxes. This is how it used to come out, orthographic. And this is true perspective, how you see the real world. Yeah? And then you've got your camera view. By clicking on here, it goes to your camera view. Okay, so that's the very basics of navigating. Zoom in, scroll. So you'll be using that a lot. And also you can use this icon here to scroll around, and you got your X, Y and Z. Now X, Y and Z is different in every different program. So I was used to using X is to left to right, Y is up and down, Z is in a distance. In Blender it's slightly different. Z is up and down, X is side to side, and Y is coming towards you and going backwards. Yeah, you can Google that for X, Y and Z coordinates. Okay, so let's cover those basic introductions. So let's move on to the side panel here. So in this side panel key here, you've got your select. So if you click on that select, you can select by just clicking. And then you've got select, and you've got a box select. So you can box select it. Yeah, by box selecting, as I say, you just left mouse click and you go over it. Now this is called your 3D cursor, and you can position your 3D cursor anywhere. I'm not going to talk about the 3D cursor just yet. I'm going to save that for another part of the tutorials that you get in this series, because I just feel the 3D cursor at pivot points needs a section on its own for you to understand it. So for the time being, don't worry about that. This is your transition. So you can move X, Y and Z like we talked about. So that's by grabbing one of those arrows, you can move it up and down. So again, see, you remember what I talked about the Y, X and Z? So I said Z up and down, side to side, just to move your object. Now if you wanted to duplicate your object, you can just click at Shift and D, and that would duplicate your object. And you just press it down, and now you've got the object duplicated. Yeah, you can just, so again, Shift D, and you duplicate your object. Now this icon here is your rotate icon. So say for example you want to just rotate your object. You've got your, if you click on the blue circle there, you can rotate it around the axis now. This is around your Z axis. And then you can rotate again around your Y axis. And you can rotate around the X axis. So that's the rotate. Then you've got your scale. This is to scale your object, so you can scale again in different axes. So you can scale in a certain axis. or you say, for example, if you want to just scale in every axis, just press S key, the S key, and then you can just scale it in proportionally. This is like your transform gimbal. So it's just a gimbal which shows you your transforms. So again, you can scale and you can move objects by say for example, I just wanted to move the object, I could just click on there and just move it. Click on there, just move it. Click on there and just move it. But if I wanted to actually scale it, I can then scale it as well. Yeah. I don't normally use this actually, to be quite honest, but some people would use it. You've got annotation. So if you wanted to write on the screen, you can write on it. I'm not going to get into that yet. We'll deal with that perhaps in the grease pencil part of the series. And this is your measurements. Again, I'm not an architect, etc. So I'm not even going to pretend I use that, the measurement tool, because I just do everything by eye. Okay, let's just briefly look at some of these icons, not all of them, but some of these icons in the sidebar. So you've got this item here. Now this is linked with your transform, rotations and scales. So say for example, more for position editing. If I wanted to move my cube and I wanted to click on it first obviously, and then I want to transform it, move it basically, you can move it instead of with that, but you can move it with either typing in coordinates, or you can just move it with your keyboard movements. And you get an X, Y, and Z. You can do the same with rotation, and you can also do the same with scale. You can also lock it so that if, say for example, you only wanted to move in one axis, and then you wanted to skip over to here, and then you wanted to only rotate in a certain axis, because I've locked the X and the Z, if I click on rotate now, you see that? It's only showing up with this icon here, so I can only rotate in the Y axis. I can't rotate in any other axis but Y. So that's for locking, and that goes with transforms as well. So if you lock your transforms, you can't even move the object because everything's locked. You can simply unlock it there. So that's just giving you an idea there. Okay, let's talk about these. Some of these here. We won't go into all of them, but we'll just go through a few of them. Ones that you really need to know to get things moving on here. You've got here. This is your render engine. So you got by default, I think it usually sets up to Eevee. You can change that to Workbench. Workbench is a different engine that will be used more for modeling, to speed up your workflow for modeling and whatever. It just basically uses less processor power. So you could use Workbench. And then you got cycles. Cycles is for more, you'd use a cycle engine if you were doing photorealistic stuff. It slows things down a lot. Not so much in the work space, but when you go to render. Okay, this icon here is your output. It looks like a printer icon, this icon here. Now you can change your resolution here by either typing or dragging the icon across. You can either type 1024, whatever, or whatever file format you want to put it. I usually render out 1020, 1920, 1080 is what I usually render at. 1920, 1080 is like HD settings, high definition settings. So I usually render at that settings. And then you've got your animation frame start, frame end. So say for example you wanted to render out 50 frames, you go frame 1 and then type in 50, and then when you hit render, which we'll deal with in another section, it would then render from frame 1 to frame 50. But we won't get into that just yet, but we'll deal with that a bit later. And then you've got your outputs. Now your output, you click on this folder icon, and then you can then either go to whatever particular volume you want to go to by going volumes, you go C drive or wherever you want to put it. And say for example we wanted to put it in our desktop, we'll go desktop, and then we click on this icon here with the plus sign, and then it's created a new folder here. Give it a name, call it and then click on it. And you see that it says my first renders. Then you give your file an actual name, so I'll call it a render1. And then just go accept. And now, if I was to render this object, it will save it into that directory. I won't render it yet because I want to show you, I'm going to go through the whole render setup in another tutorial. But for the time being, I just wanted to show you what that icon does there. Okay, let's deal with lights. So before we try and tackle lights, let's just create a floor in this scene. So we've got object, we've got add, and then we go to plane, and S for scale this up, and then we move it down, and now we've got a floor in our scene. Now, for our lights to interact in the scene, just make sure you've got this icon selected, and now you can see that the lights on. If your scene doesn't look like this, it means that Eevee's not on. So make sure Eevee's on, and now we can interact with our lights. So say for example you want to again duplicate a light, click on it, Shift D, and now we've got two lights. We can move it. You see that it's changing the way the scene looks. Now we can change this particular light to a different color by clicking on this icon here. So let's change the color. Let's just turn it red. See, the whole scene changes. Turn on the shadows and turn them on and off. So we can just go shadow off, on. That's on each individual light. So that's affecting that light here, that shadow. So if we turned off both shadows here, now we have no shadows in the scene. We can turn them on again. So now we've got them both on. Okay, so we've added two lights here. We can also change add a different type of light. So we went to add, light, area. Let's move it up because it's hidden inside that box. Every time you create an object, it creates in the very center of the world, unless you change the area you want the object to creating. We'll deal with that later, but for the time being we're not going to get into it too much. So again, we've got light here. We can increase the power of the light, the wattage, or I don't know what the technical term they use for the amplifying the power, but let's just change that to say 1,000. Let's take 10,000. See, it's made the whole scene very bright, and this is your area light. So we don't really want it that high, it's just too much. It just bleeds the whole scene out. So let's change that to say 1500, see what happens. It's a little bit better. So that's it's a square area light. You can move it obviously up and down. And another thing we can do with this light, obviously rotate it. Another really nice effect you're gonna use a lot is bloom. So you can only use bloom in Eevee or cycles. So if we went to the render right, Eevee, and then we went bloom, so you get a nice shiny kind of glow over the object. Yeah. So that's your to get that bloom effect for your lighting. You got other settings in the bloom. Just play around with them. I'm not going to get into it too much, but you just play around to get some nice settings. Yeah. And then you've got your sun. Your sun just would lighten up your whole scene. So you can again change the settings in your sun here, set in distance, etc., etc. Just play around with the settings, and then you put your contact shadows on and off. So that's your sun. So we've gone through your areas, your spots, and then you got another light, which is your spot light. So let's just turn off, let's delete these other lights, and you can get a view of what the spot's doing. move that down. So it gives you, if you want a spotlight, it gives you that spot. I think if we increase the intensity a bit more, so more than likely you'd use a spotlight, but you use it in conjunction with another light. So if we just go add another light, let's just go point, and then scale the intensity up a bit, so 1500. So there you go, so that's your light. So to me, okay, let's talk about these icons here and what they do. Now, the most important ones here are these four here. Now, these are your shaders. Now, this is your, this shader here is an X-ray shader. So if I click on that, you see that? You can see through it. That's your X-ray shader. And then you've got your wireframe shader. Click on that, and then that's your wireframe shader. And then excuse the dog barking. I think it's the next door neighbour's dog, so excuse that a minute. I might have to edit this video depending on how bad the dog gets. Okay, so we've got the shader icon here. This is a solid shader. You click on that, and you've got your solid shader. And then you've got your another shader mode, which is a little bit more detailed. And then you've got this shader here, which is, this is depending on your render engine setup. I'm not going to go too much into this yet, but I'll just touch on it briefly. In this icon here is your render settings, and you've got different render actual engines. So you've got Eevee, which is kind of your real-time renderer, and then you've got Workbench, and then you've got Cycles. If you got set to Eevee and you go onto here, that's the view you'll see. If you go to Workbench, it changes. So it's basically these engines here, you can change them, and you can, depending on what kind of effect you're trying to get and what speed of system you're working on, you can revert to speed up your workflow. But I didn't want to go and touch onto that because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole yet. So let's just go, but let's just keep it on Eevee at the minute. So that's what these icons do. And then you've got this icon here. Now, this icon here allows you to turn on visibilities or make things disappear or reappear in your scene. You're not deleting them, you're just making them reappear and disappear. So say for example you've got a very complex scene and you wanted to hide a particular object. You're not deleting it, you're just hiding it. By clicking on here, and you can go to mesh, and you can hide just the mesh itself. So if I click on that now, what will happen is that cube is going to disappear. Yeah, you see that? It's like an eye opener. So now it's closed this up, but it's not gone. And then say for example you've got, obviously you've got your lights there as well, you want to make them disappear. You can actually click on there and your light will disappear now. Yeah, and then you can do the same with the camera, and the camera will disappear. Yeah, you play around with it, you'll get the hang of it. Say for example you've got a rigged character and you've got a skeleton floating around and you want to make the skeleton disappear. Again, that's your armature. The skeleton's called the armature. Again, you click, I haven't got a skeleton there obviously at the moment, but by clicking on that it would disappear. Okay, so that's that sorted out. This icon here is like a show gizmo icon. So you've got move, rotate and scale. By clicking on here, you can turn on your gizmos, your scale, gizmos and rotates. So this is for editing your actual character. Okay, to navigate the viewpoints, for example, if you want to see a front view, top view, left view example, above your tab key is the accent key. So just above the tab key, accent key, you press on that and then you get this wheel icon that appears. And then you can just go to, if you want to see the front view, just slide your mouse over to front, and now we've got front view. If you want to see your top, slide it over, top, you get the picture. If you want to see a camera view, again, slide it over. So that's a pretty useful. So that's a pretty useful key. So remember that above the tab key, accent key, and you can get the wheel slider. Another really useful item, key, or tool to use is this. I'll show you now. Basically, if we go to view, and then you've got in this view lock, you've got lock to 3D cursor, lock to camera view, and you've got this eyedropper tool, lock to object. Now that's pretty useful. So if you've got a very complicated scene, now let's just duplicate this object. And say we want, at the moment it's rotating around this object here, but say we want to rotate the view around this object here, all we do is click on this eyedropper tool here, click on the object, and now it's always locked onto that object there. So that's another useful tool. In this lecture, we're just going to talk about learning. Now, learning is something that in my view, it's got to sink in. You know, what you've learned got to sink in. It's like, for example, if you bought a science book, and you could read the book from the beginning to the end, but none of it's soaked in if you just rush through it. You have to take bite sizes of what you're trying to learn, meditate on it, and then go back to it. So whether meditation, in my view, is like, if you sleep on it, I think what happens in the scientific proof that actually says that's true, is that when you sleep, when you actually learn something, you sleep, your brain kind of analyzes everything that you've learned, puts it all together, and it kind of solidifies what you've learned, crystallizes even what you've learned, and puts it into how do you put it, a way that you can access easily. There's another thing about muscle memory, and that's another thing. The more you do stuff, it becomes a muscle memory. So the point what I'm trying to get at is, don't try and learn everything straight away. Take bits and bites. I'm not saying that you should just only do 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day. But what I'm trying to say, when you start feeling tired or you start feeling fatigued, take a break, relax. You're not going to be this great maestro at 3D graphics, Blender or ZBrush or whatever program you're trying to master overnight. You have to understand that there's no quick fix to learning. There's no rushing. You just got to apply yourself. Be determined. It's all about dedication and determination. There's a book by a guy called Robert Greene, and it's called Mastery. I strongly advise for you guys to check it out. There's an audio version online on YouTube, and basically I think you should have a listen to that, because basically what he talks about in this book is about the steps to becoming a master. And he basically saying that it takes 10 years to become a master. I wouldn't go as far as saying in every field it takes 10 years to become a master. But what I would say is that to become great at something, you got to apply yourself daily to it, and you got to be on it, and you got to be hardcore. Determination. You got determination, and not rushing and not trying to take shortcuts. The other thing that's important to do, and what this book talks about as well, is finding mentors. I'm not saying I'm the perfect mentor to have, but I'm trying to be more active online. I'm going to be in the future. I am going to be doing weekly, or if not weekly, monthly, live streams. So whether it's me or somebody else, it's good to have a artistical mentor in the field that you're trying to go. You're going to get into. Maybe have a couple of mentors. You have a few, and follow what they're doing, and then one day you're gonna be able to not only no longer become the apprentice, but become the master.